Hi, Laura. Hi, Arielle.
Hi.
Grateful to
Hi,
see you both. How you doing on this fine day?
doing so
Good.
well.
Can't be a bad day when we get to talk about all the fun things going on in the social media world here. And maybe just to kick it off, Arielle, would love to give you the space to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, hi. So, my name is Arielle Berlinsky. I am the program manager of all things social media at Delta Vacations of Delta Airlines, and I'm also a LinkedIn influencer.
Wonderful. And I'm sure lots of fun things we can talk about, especially in the travel world. There's never an end to the innovation from a social standpoint. But to get into it, a few fun updates to start to talk about from a social media landscape standpoint. Starting off here, one around Instagram. They're testing out sort of a blended feed when it comes to content sharing. So as you share articles with your friends and start to have those fun private conversations, being able to start to explore and discover more of that similar content. I will say personally, I've done a lot more of that in the past year than I thought I ever would, where I'll be on Instagram, I'll see a cool reel of like a new restaurant opening up or some fun place to go visit, and I'll send it off to my partner or to some friends. So it's definitely become more of a habit over the years. But curious to get your thoughts, especially being in the travel space. Does this change how you think about it when you're creating content and you're thinking more about like the shareability versus the likes and the engagement? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this update.
Yeah, I think more than anything, whether it's travel or any industry you're touching where you want to further reach your audience, you don't necessarily plan going viral. I mean, we all wish we had the magic sprinkle powder that we could just put over it to make it happen. But you want to think about, how am I connecting with my community on a savability and a shareability level? Because if it's not something, especially with travel, that is going to help you when you plan a vacation that normally is months out and not just last minute around the corner, you need to know in your head, wait, I remember that video, that reel that I saw. I want to go back and see what the details of that itinerary are. And as we are already curating our private chats with our friends, our significant others, our family, it becomes a more exciting side of social where we know when we're entering a certain chat, the vibe you're going to get. You go to a certain best friend who you always know is going to send the most sarcastic memes, and that's what you're going to expect from it. So if we're finding these opportunities to pop up where they get to start to make our feeds even more unique and tailored to us, then it just becomes an accommodating experience and hopefully further connects people with the right brands, the right ads, UGC, etc. So I'm excited to see where that can lead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always like, for me personally, I'm always very excited to like explore new restaurants. So to see more of that, to discover things I wouldn't know, like that gets me excited. And it's an update that I didn't sort of know I needed until I heard about it. Curious, Laura, to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, well, I think so much of social media also happens like in the DM now. So I feel like it's such a good way, like both of you have said, to get that discoverability, especially something that you're more likely to enjoy based on what you and friends are sending back and forth, or you and whoever is in that sort of direct message with you. So definitely a great opportunity for discoverability, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how brands sort of bring that into play, right? Like a lot of consumer brands, like what you're saying, Arielle, make 100% sense, right? Like getting some of those recommendations or things to try. It'll be interesting to see for some of the more B2B businesses, what they do, because so much is recruitment based or like employee life. So it'll be interesting to see like how their sort of content maybe pops up between employees that are connected or what have you. But overall, I think a really cool update for sure.
And I think more than anything, especially when it comes to brands putting out content, the ones that I like to say have the scroll stopping moment are the ones that you say, oh my gosh, wait, that was a brand who made that? It seems like something my neighbor down the road would have made, because there's something to say when it's too polished, too perfect, too out of reach, and sometimes out of touch. And if we can find more of those ways through updates like this, where they're really leaning into the opportunity to say, how can I put out a piece that is tangible and makes us seem more human, because that is what resonates, we've found, in what, content we make over at Delta Vacations to be so true.
Wonderful. Continuing along here, another very exciting update. This ties into a few announcements too previously from YouTube recently, and I think one that I've heard has been asked for quite a long time. I was talking to our own internal people about a year ago who were managing our own YouTube channels, and there's lots of headaches around the type of data and the types of things you can see within the platform. For those who luckily don't have to endure that, even things like if you're running paid ads on YouTube, separating out the views from the organic has traditionally been quite difficult. And so lots of new updates here around analytics, being able to understand sort of how your subscribed versus your non-subscribed audience engages with your content, how new versus returning users engage with your content, paid versus organic as well too, which in a lot of other social channels seems to be sort of the norm, and YouTube now is starting to catch up a little bit as well too. Are you involved at all, Arielle, in any of your YouTube content? Are you excited to see these updates?
I say the more the merrier, right? When it comes to KPIs, and we only have so much time managing social media, we need to know as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And I think this is such an awesome update, because being able to say, how am I keeping the people who are already subscribed to me coming back for more, and what is actually captivating the attention of those non-subscribers, or what's losing them, then you can really learn how to best pivot with your strategy and your approach to your marketing in that space.
Yeah, I always hear too, and I don't have live experience with this, but from what I've talked to people about, when it comes to YouTube and the subscriber audience as well, it's very hard sometimes to understand as you try and build this community, when you're seeing videos do successful, is that the people, the audience that you're trying to create, or is this just someone different or not the people you're trying to reach? When I think about brands especially too, like Hootsuite, we want to be connecting with social media managers, we want to be building that community, and we want those people subscribing to us and building that, rather than maybe people who don't care as much or aren't as related. And I think having a clearer sense of that audience that you've been building and how they specifically interact can be huge there. I feel like this could be great on other social networks too, like if we could see that for follower engaged content versus non-follower. So hopefully we can see platforms like LinkedIn follow suit. But I'm curious, Laura, for your take as well.
Yeah, there's actually been so many customers at Hootsuite that I've been chatting with recently that are like, I want to build a YouTube strategy. How do I get started? What do I do? And they've historically just used the platform as like a media library. So they're putting videos up there that they'll reference other places. And so I think this will actually give them some really, really good tools to start broaching, that strategy more than just a media library. They'll see like, okay, what videos are maybe resonating with folks that aren't subscribers? How do we tweak things? As you're A/B testing maybe new video types, you'll get to see how it's reaching certain audiences that maybe you want to be reaching. So I think it'll give people a lot of really good tools, especially as they're starting out their YouTube journey as a business, to see what's working and what's not.
Because like they say, knowledge is power.
Exactly.
And then last update to talk about here, and this one I was very fascinated by. It came out just over a month and a bit ago, but I think took a very different direction than Instagram and Threads had initially thought when they were announcing this. And this is around sort of political content and what that looks like within the platform. Obviously, this year's an election year. Lots of conversations can be coming in around that. It'll be quite the buzz, especially as we get closer to November. But what's been interesting here, so for the context around the update, Threads and Instagram have made it so that you have to opt in to see political content within the platform. They do that through some automated tagging on the back end, and I think people are still trying to figure exactly how that affects some of their own content. And the goal behind that is to focus more on the core aspects of it, the brands, the social, the community side of things. But a lot of people of our generation and of younger generations are actually very against this, and they're talking about wanting to opt in and be a part of the conversation from a political perspective. And I'd be interesting to see if Instagram or the Threads team there predicted that sort of reaction. Curious to get your take though, Arielle, as you've seen whether it's friends or family talking about this, or just overall as you think about sort of the type of content and how Instagram and Meta are thinking about sort of political content in the broader scope of things.
Yeah. So It's interesting whether you opt in or not, they'll still serve you whatever posts are and ads are happening from accounts that are political accounts that you do follow. But I think that, listen, social media is meant to be a personalized experience, but also we live in this beautiful day and age where we get to learn and grow and expand our minds in a way like our ancestors never had access to before, right? And there is a comfort for a lot of people in knowing they can go onto a platform and say, you know what, I research it all the time. I read the paper, I watch the news, I'm consumed with it, with discussions with friends and family. I want a space where I can go in and kind of move away from that. And I can respect that for those who want that. But I think two other parts. One, if you're making a change like this, it needs to be pushed in ads and pieces internally and externally constantly so that people have the knowledge that they have this power to choose to jump into it or filter themselves from it, because then you have the ability to make that choice. But I think on the flip side, sometimes we will get educated about things that we wouldn't have known about otherwise. And you should expand your eyes too. And you wouldn't have necessarily followed an account that is educating you on political aspects that you need to further learn about. So I can respect either choice, but I think there are for sure pros and cons to both.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a very tricky and a fine line that the Meta team has to, and all social networks do have to walk here when you think about these types of high pressure moments. And I think they're trying to do something quite different than what they did last time. I'm sure if we look to 2028 and the next election cycle as well too, they'll probably do something different there. So it's sort of the pendulum swinging back and forth to find that right balance. And it's wild to think, but social media is definitely still a very young platform and forum of these types of conversations. Like some platforms as early as a couple years old for things like TikTok or LinkedIn from 20 years old, but still quite young in the grand scheme of conversation. So it'll be interesting to see how this does evolve. Curious to know, Laura, have you re-enabled political content on yours yet? Do you have any thoughts yourself on these updates?
Yeah. I think Arielle hit it right on the head, honestly. I'd agree completely. It'd be interesting because from my understanding, and this could be off base, the option is automatically turned off. And so then you have to go into your settings and turn it on. It could have been maybe a little bit better of an experience if it was on for everybody and you would have the option to go in and turn it off if you wanted to not have political content on your feed. So more so thinking of that user experience. But, I think it's one of those things where discoverability, again, is so great. I know, I personally learn a lot on social about, different political issues and whatnot. So it's too bad that those are going away. But I do appreciate the fact that if you follow a certain account, you'll still get those updates. So, I definitely would, turn it back on. But yeah, I just learned about this update. So I'm going to have to go in and do that after our session here. But yeah.
No, I think you hit a great point too. I remember Freakonomics talks about this in their book around the opt-in versus opt-out, where if you have the opt-in, it's much more like it's going to be 80% of people are not going to go through that headache and that process versus 20% you do, versus opt-out, sort of the flip side of those numbers. So it's an interesting decision regardless there. On to the question of the day here, and one, Arielle, I'm quite excited to chat with you about, especially being sort of in the early stages of your career from a social media management perspective. And one key topic of conversation that comes up here, especially in my day-to-day and many people that I've talked to, is sort of the future of more senior marketing roles, we talk about social media managers being those future CMOs and those leaders from a department perspective. We're starting to see people who have started off in the social media management world move up to those senior manager, those director level roles within organizations, and some who are getting to that higher C-level as well too. So one that I'm quite fascinated about, I'm sure will change a lot here too, but sort of on the two sides of the coin, one with you building your own personal brand and all the amazing work that you've done there, but two, in your own professional career, like how do you approach setting yourself up for growth in your career in the long term, being able to go beyond just sort of the social media world into those more senior marketing roles?
Yeah, great question. So for me, I always recommend to people step outside of just the work and items that are on your to-do list at the office and get curious, ask around about other projects in the marketing space, even outside of the marketing space, because you are the voice behind the whole company. So you should understand all the different moving parts. And I understand for a lot, that means probably they don't necessarily want to go have a conversation with finance, but that's understandable. Really speak to your interests, speak with not just your boss, but other leaders in the company of the fact that you want to grow, you want to learn, you want to be a sponge, you want to know how you can further get to the next steps, what different opportunities could look like. And the more you take on new projects, and you have these conversations, you start to learn more about yourself, sharpen the tools that are in your belt, and really get to evolve in high-level decision-making along the way, especially as you grow in your role and hopefully get team members underneath you that you can help guide along the way. And more than anything, just personal branding, which is another thing of why I got into the space of LinkedIn. It's this beautiful space in which you get to learn from all these amazing people in your industry and outside of it. And you get to have conversations where you start to think, you know what, that's not even a possibility that was on my roster, but now that I hear about it, I want to do that, or I want to pivot in some way. And again, about the education is power, you really get to soak that in. But more than anything, you're your biggest advocate. Even if you have the best boss in the world and they're always looking out for you and wanting to promote you and get you to that next level, it is about having the confidence to say, if I don't know something or I'm intimidated to step into that space, it's okay. We're all human. I'm going to learn and go through growing pains and take that chance, because a butterfly has to go and break through its cocoon in order to fly. And you have to trust that everyone goes through that, no matter how high up they are. You should always be learning.
I love that. And I love the way you framed it as well too there. I think it's social media, it brings such a great balance to sort of the skills that you get to build on the technical side, where you get to go into the analytics and sort of the marketing theory behind that. And then on the creative side, where you're doing designs and talking to customers in such a close fashion. But it, like you said, it's so important to get out there, get involved in projects in different departments as well too, that are much more beyond your scope. As you see some of these senior leaders as well too, when you think about people who are in that CMO role today who may be listening, or in those senior director roles as well too, and trying to help support people in the social media world along their career path and their career growth, because often it can be a little bit of a challenge, right? Where it's like, once you manage social media for a brand, like what's the next step? Where are you going up from there within in your own career? Is there anything you would want them to be thinking about or advising them to help support their team?
I would say just even understanding on the deepest of levels, off of what you were mentioning, we have our hand in so many different piles of what is going on with the company. And it has to do with really being a cheerleader for your team members and understanding the effort that goes into a mix of managing an entire community, having to rotate ads and KPI analysis, amongst other things. You have to balance so many tasks while wearing so many hats and catch on to trends quicker than lightning. So knowing that these are all very great traits to funnel into all sorts of roles is be more open-minded in knowing that social media managers can do so much more than just social media. And the more that they're open-minded to it, the more that those opportunities will start to really expand for all of us.
Wonderful. And I think too, one thing to wrap up and call out that I like that you mentioned earlier is always a tricky one too, like that relationship with finance, a lot of those types of sort of managers roles. It's not always the most fun, but I think in talking to a lot of senior people within marketing organizations, like managing budgets, being able to get a handle on that and managing different stakeholders can be so important. There, I think the social media manager role gives a great entry into that when you're managing things like paid or other budgets for influencer activations and the like. But I feel like that's probably one of the key skills to be thinking about too from a long-term career growth when you think about how do we get social media managers into those CMO roles and really changing the way that marketing looks across the board there. On that note, continuing on to sort of wrap up the show, I wanted to share a little bit of a highlight of the week. Arielle, you graciously sent this one along too. It was quite fun to see this come up. I think we've all been seeing some incredible creative ideas over these past few weeks when it comes to things like April Fool's pranks or just creative brand partnerships. And wanted to pass this one over to you to speak about a little bit with Olipop and the Pringles collaboration here.
So Olipop and Pringles had done this, scroll stopping post leading up to April Fool's Day, not even just on the day itself, to say a collab was happening. And it started chatter so fast. I keep seeing these insanely unexpected duos coming together on a huge amount of campaigns, even in the regular marketing space, not just as a prank, but it got the people talking about this sour cream and onion soda that of course is not real, but it's hilarious. And it really is further opening the door for bringing two completely different worlds that should never touch together. And in this 2024 year, I want to see more of that on so many levels because it is unexpected. It keeps you on your toes and it makes you want to share it with people. So for that reason, I applaud them.
Yeah, I love to hear that too. It reminds me a lot of if people followed along the Liquid Death and Health Makeup partnership as well too, where it's truly like two things you would never think to put together, but start to come together. We were talking about this in the show last week as well too. A great place to end. But what gets me so excited about these types of things is that you think their marketing's exhausted all the creative ideas you could possibly come up with for things to get people engaged or to create scroll stopping content, but there's never enough surprises to come up with new ideas, new creative ways to get people engaged from a content perspective too. Maybe Laura, any last thoughts on this highlight of the week?
Oh, I love it. It's so fun. And I think such a good way to also, cross promote to a different audience as well when you have two brands collaborating on a post like this. So really smart on the social media manager side as well to help maybe boost their audience, get a little extra visibility as well. So love it. I think it's so good.
And then as we wrap up, Arielle, anything you want to tell the audience about, anything you'd like to promote in terms of what's going on in your world?
Yes, I would say if you want to follow for unfiltered advice on how to conquer your life, your career, and all things social media and marketing, make sure to follow me, Arielle Berlinsky, on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. I highly encourage people to do it. I love seeing your content pop up on my feed every time. You're definitely one of those faces I always keep an eye out for too. So thank you again so much for joining the show. Loved having you on here today and wishing everyone a wonderful rest of their week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, everyone.